So my first job in healthcare was when I was in high school, and I was a nursing assistant in a nursing home. I loved this job. It meant a lot to me. It just made a big impression on my life. I was so proud. I had my polyester uniform and those nasty white nursing shoes they make you wear. I loved it. Learned how to make a bed with somebody still in it. Very valuable skill. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about people. When I first started working there, it seemed like everybody in the building was either nursing staff or old people. Just sort of like undifferentiated old people. But it didn't take long before you start recognizing people's individuality. You start remembering which lady always liked to have a teddy bear with her in her wheelchair, who liked to have her nails painted bright red. Recognizing which ones are hard of hearing and who needs a special diet, and what matters to each of them. You recognize that some people just really need their privacy, others like to talk. Some people will never take pain medication because they don't like it and kind of dozy and out of it. And other people don't mind feeling a little dozy if it means they don't have to be hurting. But over time, you get to really know them as people. You get to see the pictures by the bedside of their kids and grandkids. And sometimes you'll be looking at them and you'll look at a beautiful bride or a little boy holding onto his brother's hand and you'll go, whoa, that's you, right? That's you. And you start to see that these aren't old people so much as they are people. And this is the moment in their lives when they're old. You start recognizing that this is just one chapter in the whole story of their lives. And ever since then, I've tried to remember to think about people in terms of stories. Because it's really easy to make the mistake of thinking of a person and how they seem to us at that moment, that that's all they are. Like if you're ever playing with kids and you think of, well, this is a child, instead of this is a person who is a child now and will be an old person someday. Or like if someone cuts you off in traffic and you think this is a jerk, instead of this person is driving like a jerk right now. It's hard to remember that we are our whole stories. And this is really true in healthcare. We can get so distracted in healthcare by the symptoms and conditions and diagnoses that we kind of lose sight of the whole person. It can even happen to us when we're the patient. You can kind of lose track of who you are and what matters most to you in this sort of maze of test results and treatment options. It's not entirely surprising that this could happen, right? Because medicine is focused on fixing our bodies. And there is a lot to know about bodies and about how they work and about what we can do to fix them. But medicine is at its best when it recognizes us as more than bodies, but as embodied authors of our life stories. This loss of perspective is especially poignant and notable when we reach end of life. In the last few years, you may have noticed kind of an uptick in attention to the fact that many people get a lot of invasive treatment and a lot of interventions in the last weeks and months and sometimes even years of their lives. And these interventions can extend the quantity of our lives, but sometimes at a great cost to the quality of our lives. The interventions are not the problem. The problem is not the chemo. The problem is not the feeding tubes and the ventilators and things that can extend our lives. The problem, when there is one, is continuing to look to these interventions when they can't restore us back to a life that is meaningful to us. If you've ever heard of initiatives like the Conversation Project, and books like being mortal and knocking on heaven's door. You'll be familiar with this question about whether we should be using medicine in this very automatic, algorithmic way, where we look at a condition and we look at the intervention, condition and the intervention, so that at some point in life people are so focused on doctor's appointments and getting to treatment that they're not thinking about, what do I want this phase of life to look like? How do I want to spend my time? And who do I want to spend my time with? So these folks are suggesting that instead of doctors asking themselves what intervention is appropriate for this condition, they should be asking us, what is most troubling to you? What do you want most, and what do you want most to avoid? They suggest that these questions can help people at the moment when they are patients to retain authorship of their life stories. There's no getting around the fact that illness, injury, pain, death are wrenching, awful experiences. There's really no way around that. And the reason they're so awful is because when you're seriously ill, something important is being threatened. Your ability to communicate, your ability to be mobile, your independence, your ability to work, to enjoy the activities you enjoy. And when these things are threatened, bigger things are threatened, like our self-esteem, our relationships, our identities. Often in a moment like that, medicine can help us, and that happens all the time, and it's fabulous when it does. And then there are also times when medicine can't help us, but it's important to a person to try anyway, because if they're going down, they're gonna go down swinging, and they just want to keep fighting. And that's good too. But there are also times when this approach can keep us from being present in these very painful but sacred, meaningful moments in life. And it can feed our denial that, like it or not, life is changing. And it can rob us of the opportunities to say the things that, for example, Dr. Ira Byock says we all need to hear, especially at end of life. I love you. Please forgive me. I forgive you. Thank you. If we can't come to terms with the fact that death is not optional, that it is in fact the final chapter of every story, then our chance to have a good hand in writing that final chapter is going to be compromised. And if medicine can't come to terms with the fact that the death of a patient is not always a failure, then medicine's ability to help us in these moments will be compromised. So, I want to suggest that the antidote to this situation is that we should all be reflecting on two things. The first is, what is the purpose of medicine? What do we want it to do for us? I know that seems like a silly question. In fact, if you ever want to really confuse a room full of medical students, go ahead and ask them that. What is medicine for? They're like, do you not know this? They say, well, medicine is to save lives. Okay, fair enough. But we need a more finessed answer, because if all medicine is for saving lives, no matter what, that's what puts us in danger of creating a lot of misery. So maybe a better answer, and here I'm paraphrasing the bioethicist Daniel Callahan, maybe a better, more finessed answer is that medicine is for the care and cure of those who can be cured, and the care of those who can't be cured. Or put another way, it is for the prevention of a premature death and the pursuit of a peaceful death. And here I'm not talking about physician-assisted suicide or anything like that. I'm talking about recognizing both the immense potential and the very real limits of the role that medicine can play in our lives. About when to use medicine to focus on cure and when to use medicine to focus on comfort. The second thing that we all need to be reflecting on is what matters. What matters most to us as individuals. For each of us, when the time in life comes for trade-offs, when illness threatens the things that matter, what are we most afraid of? What are the things in life that make life good? What are we willing to live without? What are we not willing to live without? When I suggest this to people, they say, well, aren't you just the bluebird of happiness? This is depressing. But I don't think it is depressing. I don't think that living with awareness of our own mortality is depressing. Because it's not about sitting there thinking about all the terrible things that could happen to you. It's about living with deep recognition and appreciation for what is happening now. It's about living with gratitude, and it's about knowing that these things are that much more precious because they're finite. It's kind of like the composer Leonard Bernstein said once, that to achieve great things, two things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time. So I'm going to tell you about someone that I think did this really well in his life, my grandfather. Gramps loved fishing, loved to work in his garden, liked a good game of cards and a good cigar, loved sappy musicals, and he loved to eat, and he loved us, and we loved him. When he was in his 60s, he was diagnosed with heart disease. And between good medicine and good luck, and giving up those cigars, and my grandmother watching his diet like a hawk, he did great. Got back to his life, did all the things he did. When he was in his 80s, he came down with pneumonia. And it got worse. And he had to go to the hospital. And it got worse. And he got to where he couldn't breathe without a ventilator. And so the question was, would he want a ventilator? Would he want to go on life support? And the answer to that question is always another question. The second question is, will that intervention get him back to the things that matter most? And the answer at that time was probably. Probably, maybe not everything, and not for sure, because nothing in this life is for sure, but probably enough. So he went on the ventilator, and he got better, and he got home, and he was maybe a little slowed down, maybe a little weaker, but he got back to the life he'd loved. And then 4 months shy of his 90th birthday, he had a stroke. Massive stroke. And so the question, would he want intensive medical interventions at this time? And the second question, will those get him back to what matters? But the answer at that time was no. No. Medicine can keep his body going, but it can't get him back to enough of the things that made life sweet for him. So instead of the ICU, instead of the needles and the tubes and the machines, he had hospice. He had good nursing care. He had family around him, love, forgiveness, gratitude. And that is how his story ended. want to leave you with a poem. This is from the American poet Jane Kenyon, and this is called Otherwise. I got out of bed on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birch wood. All day long, I did the work I love. At noon, I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with pictures on the walls, and I planned another day just like this day. But one day I know it will be otherwise. Thank you.